What's up, my wizards? It's Deb from Mtg. We like magic, and today we're going to see if we can resurrect a deck and bring it shambling back into standard. Here's Mono Black Zombies. Now, up to this point, this is the deck that I've labbed the most in Core Set Standard because I really want zombies to have a chance in this format, and I think that it might this time around. And there was a point where I thought this deck was going to just build itself, but no, that was super silly of me. Turns out there's a lot to dig up when you're talking about zombies. There's a bunch of different ways to build the deck right now in Standard, and we'll talk about those different ideas sort of as we move through here and why I went with Mono Black. But for now, I want to go ahead and get to it because, again, there's a lot to unearth. Let's get all the puns in at the beginning here. But in any case, I want to go ahead and start talking about the best zombie payoff in the deck, Liliana Untouched by Death. Now, the way this usually plays out in the mid-game when you get it on curve is it converts into 2 removal spells in a row, which is really good. Like, it'll be a shock and then a lightning strike, or sometimes 2 lightning strikes. Sometimes even a lightning strike and then a cut. Like, this is really good when it's just 2 removal spells in a row. And when you get it late against control, when you've got 5, 6, 7 mana, sometimes this will just allow you to dump your whole graveyard back onto the battlefield, and they don't typically want that. And we pack the deck with enough zombies as we reasonably can to make all of her abilities work well. We've got just shy of 20 natural zombies in the main deck, and then when you count all the zombies, in air quotes, it brings us up to 26, which is more than enough to make Elvira work. She is garbage in just about any other deck, and all the jokes I've made at her expense still apply. Liliana untouched by players and all that stuff, yeah. But in this deck, this is the sauce. But I should probably start talking about them zombs, because to make Sabrina the Teenage Morticia work, just about every other card in the deck has to be a zombie, save for a few slots. But luckily, just about every spot on the curve already had good zombies and also got good new zombies. So I'm going to go ahead and start at 1 on the curve here with Dread Wanderer and Diregraph Ghoul. We're going to play playsets of both of these. Now, it looks like a lot to play 8 1-drop zombies, but I want to be able to get in quick damage against control decks and establish some board presence against them, and I want to be able to sort of keep up with the board presence of the mono-red aggro deck and trade drops early with them if we possibly can. So I think it's important to play all 8 of these 1-drops. And they both have their advantages. You know, Dread Wanderer might die to Goblin Chainwhirler, but at least it can come back if you needed to. And against control, it's really valuable. It'll just bug them all game. It's awesome against other, like, grindy or long game type decks. And Diregraph Ghoul might not be able to come back a bunch of times, but it at least doesn't die to Goblin Chainwhirler in the first place, which is a plus. Now, in the 2-drop slot, we also already had a decent card, and we got a really good new card. But I'll talk about the one we already know about first, and that's the 4 copies of Metallic Mimic. Now, this card might not look super good in a meta where Chainwhirler is so dominant, but in this deck, there is a little bit of a ray of hope. You know, as long as we're on the play, we expect to get an Anthem effect on turn 3, and that'll protect Metallic Mimic from Chainwhirler's into the battlefield trigger, so that's good enough. Plus, with Mimic in the list, that gives us 14 different power-boosting effects for all of our different zombies in the deck. That is really, really good. And in longer games, you're just going to crush them under an avalanche of value. And Metallic Mimic's part of that. It's actually one of the best 2-drops we can play for this deck. And yeah, this is one of the hardest decisions in building this deck, is do we want to just build straight mono black with Metallic Mimic, or do we want to go black-white and play Wayward Servant, which is a pretty good card and looks decent in keeping up with the mono-red decks. But in the end, I wanted the consistency, and I even wanted the extra sort of Anthem effect that this card provides. So, end of the day, I went with Metallic Mimic. That was mostly because I didn't want to force the mana base, because I also wanted the room to play 4 Graveyard Marshal in the 2-drop slot, and that would be kind of tough if we were also playing Wayward Servant to guarantee that we could play either one of them on turn 2. And we have to play 4 Graveyard Marshal because it is absolutely the best card in the entire deck. This card is the real honest truth. First of all, the stats are very real. This is like a Scrap Heap Scrounger that can block. Stat-wise, that's really awesome. Plus, this can provide really good value for you over the course of a game, just by picking creatures out of the graveyard, which may seem a little bit at odds with Liliana's ultimate, but that's totally fine. You'll take it when you need it, and you can do it at instant speed. That's pretty good too. You can do it at the end of your opponent's turn if you have extra mana and you need a mana sink, and then you'll start the next turn with some untapped zombs out. That's really sweet too. It's great to follow up a Fumigate or any other sweeper with something like this as well. So there's just a bunch of different play lines where a card like this is awesome, whether you're getting it earlier on in the game on curve, or you're getting it later on in the game, whether you're ahead or behind. This can put you way ahead on board presence or catch you back up. So there's just almost no time where Graveyard Marshal is a bad card. But moving into the 3-drop slot here, again, we already had an amazing Anthem effect at 3-drop in Lord of the Accursed, but we got another great Anthem effect at 3-drop in Death Baron and Core Set. Now, hopefully this helps put your mind at ease about Metallic Mimic being in the deck. Again, having 7 3-drop Anthems really helps protect your Metallic Mimic from Chain Whirler and Walking Ballistas and stuff like that. So there's that, but note how well these cards work together. Obviously, they combine to give all your zombies +2/+2. That's good enough, but being able to put, possible Menace together with Death Touch is a really scary combination. Now, Lord of the Accursed activated ability has always been important. Giving Menace to all your zombies can break games wide open if you're at parity with your opponent, or even just a little bit ahead. That's often just Alpha Strike, you win the game. But the Death Touch on Baron is really, really important too. This is just going to let you threaten to attack with all your guys and make your opponent sweat on blocks, or it's going to make them sweat about attacking in the first place when it's their turn and you have like any untapped zombies. So Baron giving your creatures Death Touch is really almost on par with the Anthem effect. It's just insane in combat. But we'll finish the zombies here with 3 copies of Liliana's Mastery, which may not be an actual zombie, but it does make 2 zombies for us. And this was always one of the best cards in the zombie deck like a year ago. It's almost a finisher because it's always at least going to put 6 power on the battlefield. But in this deck, it's often going to put, 8 or even 10 power on the battlefield, especially the later we get it. The better this card often is because it's just going to put a ridiculous amount of power out all at one time. And it takes your opponent 3 removal spells to completely clean up the mess this creates. They have to remove the enchantment and the 2 creatures. It's unbelievable when you resolve it against control, because if they just want to kill the creatures, that takes 2 different spot removal spells, which is effectively card advantage your way. And against aggro, once you get to this, it just helps you establish board dominance or parity if you're behind. There's just nothing bad about Liliana's Mastery, and it gives us yet another Anthem effect in this deck. There's just so many, literally more than half of the quote zombies that we're playing in the deck are Anthem effects. That gets out of control really fast. But we'll clean up the main deck here with a little bit of removal. We're going to devote 6 slots to 4 copies of Fatal Push and 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt, which I wanted to play 0 of when this deck started off, but we honestly gotta play at least a couple of copies because this deck just dies to cards like Rekindling Phoenix and Glorybringer and Lyra Dawnbringer. There's just a bunch of big mid-range flying creatures that really put a damper on our situation, so we've gotta have something to deal with those. And all the different, planeswalkers to fairies in this format, sometimes Karns, Tezzerets occasionally now. There's a bunch of planeswalkers that we have to worry about too. We want the ability to take them out. Plus, this is another answer against Hazoret. Liliana kind of is, but this is a very reliable answer to Hazoret that also catches us up a little bit on life if we've lost any so far to the aggro deck. So I just think it's a fact of life. You got to make concessions for Vraska's Contempt, and you might even want to play a 3rd. You might want to do that, but I also think we should play 4 copies of Fatal Push, although I think it might be worth it to cut a push and either play a 3rd Contempt or a single copy of Cast Down. Talk about that card once we get to the sideboard, but Fatal Push is what I went with here, all 4 copies, because sometimes you want to be able to do things like on turn 3 if you miss an Anthem, you want to play a 2-drop zombie and a Fatal Push. That's a good play. So I like to have as many 1-drop cards as we can so we can maximize the efficiency of our mana in the early game. Fatal Push is really good at doing that, and we need this card to help us keep in the game against aggro. So they're just a lot better at developing their board in the early game than we are in a lot of ways. They play like 12 1-drops, So we've got to be able to catch back up with them. Fatal Push a good option for that too. Now, we're playing 25 lands here because we got some 5-drops and a bunch of 4-drops that we're trying to get to. So I want to keep the mana consistent, and we're not too worried about flooding because we have a few different mana sinks. Dread Wanderer, Graveyard Marshal, Lord of the Accursed. There's plenty of ways to use our mana if we need to. So 25 isn't as much as it seems like. And luckily, we get If Near Deadlands. That's effectively another removal spell. Always welcome. That's a good thing. And we've even got room for 1 Cabal Stronghold. I don't want to play too many colorless lands in this deck because I want to nearly guarantee Graveyard Marshal on turn 2. But there is a card in the sideboard that I'd really like Cabal Stronghold for. Plus, again, I just mentioned all those mana sinks. Sometimes you want to use all of them in the same turn, or you just want to pump a bunch of mana into Graveyard Marshal, and Cabal Stronghold will occasionally let you do that in the late game. Now here's the sideboard right here, and the card that I want the Cabal Stronghold in the land base for is this one copy of Jozu Vest, because in the very late game against Control, if you resolve this, that's game over unless they have a Settle the Wreckage or Fumigate or whatever. And yeah, they might very well have those cards, but it's just good to have this as an extra option and a big fat threat even if you don't kick it into play. Cabal Stronghold, even though we're only playing one copy of each of these cards, I just think makes it that much slight percentage chance easier to cast a Jozu earlier than you're supposed to, and I'll take that. But there are going to be plenty of times where you don't even have a Cabal Stronghold, and you cast this on like turn 16 against Control to win the game if you resolve it. Aside from that, we've also got 4 Duress against Control, but I didn't devote too many sideboard slots to the Control matchup because we get on their nerves a lot already. We have a very good matchup against them because we've got a bunch of different ways of getting creatures back from the graveyard, so I didn't focus on those matches too much. Instead, I decided to devote some slots to the Godfarer's Gift matchup in Crook of Condemnation. Those decks are making a comeback here while they still got a chance these last few months while they're in Standard, and I wanted at least to devote a couple of slots to beating them because a Resolved Angel of Invention is very, very good against us. We want to be able to kill it at instant speed, which is also a big reason why Cast Down is in the sideboard. It's very good against a reanimated, hasted Angel of Invention, and it's great against Glorybringer, another card that we're relatively bad against. And aside from that, it also cleans up Rekindling Phoenix at least for a turn to help us get in a good swing, and it'll kill, Steel Leaf Champion. These are all really important targets, so I want to make some room for Cast Down as well. Another removal piece you might be looking at in the sideboard is the other 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt. Sorry I had to do it to you, but I just think this card is too valuable right now, and like any black deck, should probably carry 4 copies between the main deck and the sideboard, if not all 4 copies in the main deck, if the deck can afford to have that many cards at the 4-drop slot. But I just wanted to have all 4 copies available to us somewhere in this deck because Contempt is just too good. It kills Teferi and other Planeswalkers, Rekindling Phoenix, Glorybringer, Hasted Angel of Invention, Hazaret. There's just too many targets that are really, really good against us that this takes care of for us not to play all 4. I guess if you wanted to knock a bunch of money off the budget here, you could always just play Hour of Glory instead. Sure, it doesn't kill the Planeswalkers or anything, but it's still a 4-mana instant speed way to deal with all these creatures that really, really are very, very good against us. So you could play Hour of Glory if you wanted to. That would knock a lot of dollars off, but Vraska's Contempt is obviously the stronger card. We've also got Death's Majesty in there, and sure, this can too go in there against Control if you wanted another piece to go in against Control. Never-ending creature factories tend to be really good, and it's another way to reanimate creatures. All that's fine, but it especially shines in like slower, grindy, mid-range matchups. This card is very, very good in those as well. So I wanted access to this Liliana somewhere in the 75, decided to relegate it to the sideboard. But we are playing another 5-drop in this deck, and that's the 2 copies of Sky Sovereign. That's our secret weapon in the sideboard. This is the only card in the entire deck that flies. That is very, very noteworthy. And it's going to take down, creatures either when it enters the battlefield or when it attacks. This is a effectively recursible removal spell that we can use multiple turns in a row, and that is unbelievable against aggro. So we're going to bring this in against mono red and other aggro decks a lot of the time, because this is going to zap, 2-3 creatures over the course of a game and get in for a ton of damage sometimes too. Now, before I get to the power rankings, I just want to talk about a couple of different ways to build this deck. I've obviously already brought up the black-white deck with Wayward Servant, but I think that's probably the only white card you play in the deck, and I don't want to force the mana base to get to play Wayward Servant. Yeah, you've got Concealed Courtyard, Isolated Chapel, and even Unclaimed Territory, and I think you could play Unclaimed Territory in this deck and still have, over 20 untapped black sources to play like Vraska's Contempt and Fatal Push and Liliana and all that. Without having to worry too much. Unclaimed Territory could still play a bunch of the cards in your deck and also get you to Wayward Servant. That would give you at least 12 white sources, but I still don't know that I want to force the mana base. I want as much consistency as possible, and I want to take advantage of that by just going straight mono black. But another way to build this deck is to consider going blue-black so that you have access to the Scarab God. And even though we don't usually pay that much attention to the first few lines of text on Scarab God, it's actually really, really good in a zombie deck, obviously, and it's another way to get zombies out of your graveyard. Plus, you get to refer to it as Resident Weevil. That seems pretty awesome too. So, if nothing else, comedy points. And yet another idea that I considered that I actually think might be really strong if you get the numbers right is to, instead of playing Metallic Mimic, play like Scrap Heap Scrounger, Heart of Kiran. They go really well together, and you've already got Graveyard Marshal to help you crew that Heart of Kiran. Plus, if you get a 1-drop and then a 2-drop Heart of Kiran, 3-drop Lord, that gives the 1-drop the ability to crew the Heart of Kiran. And it gives you a flying creature, gives you a fast clock against control decks. I just think there might be something to playing Heart of Kiran in this deck. Plus, you might even get to play Karn in that deck. Goes pretty well with Heart of Kiran for a couple of different reasons, and it gives us a way to draw cards. That's one thing this deck really misses. It doesn't have Crypt Breaker anymore. And even though Karn isn't quite Crypt Breaker, the deck would still really love a way to draw cards, and Karn would give us a way to do that. The only problem is at that point you're cutting a lot of zombies, like you're not really playing a zombies deck anymore. So there is an issue, but I think in just terms of straight like mono black midrange or mono black aggro, there might be something to the combination of Graveyard Marshal, Scrap Heap Scrounger, and Heart of Kiran, plus Karn on the top end of the curve there. I think there might be something to that, but I don't think it really qualifies as a zombies deck. But let's get to these power rankings, because they're actually really high. We got a final score of 67 here, because this deck does an awful lot. Even though it's not super versatile, it's definitely its lowest mark here. It just kind of, comes at you like brains. It's just trying to establish board presence and make its zombies bigger and bigger. We've got a definite game plan here that we don't want to deviate too much off of. But despite the low versatility, we still end up with relatively high offense and defense scores. The fact that we're playing Liliana, Fatal Push, and Vrasta's Contempt gives us a relatively wide array of defensive options, but we've still got like 26 different cards in the deck that either are or create creatures for us, and a bunch of different ways to bring those creatures back. So our offense is pretty relentless. Now, I think this deck is uniquely positioned right now. It's sort of a half aggro, half mid-range deck, and you could make the argument that decks like that are usually pretty good against all-in aggro decks because mid-range decks tend to be good against aggro, just sort of by the paper, rock, scissors rule. We're playing enough, removal in this deck, and we've got enough board presence, too, to keep up with those aggro decks that we should be able to stay in the game and eventually either go over the top of them or create card advantage through reanimation to just help blow them out later on in the game. So we have that going for us, but we also have the fact that we have a bunch of recursible creatures against control, and that's typically also very good against those decks. And those tend to be two of the best decks in the format, whether it's, mono-red aggro, black-red aggro, or blue-white control, blue-black control. We've just got a lot of different tools against some of the best decks in the format, so zombies might be the way to go right now. And if you were interested in trying this deck, the lowest price you can get it at is on tcgplayer.com. Full disclosure, they obviously do sponsor my content. I've said that about 1,000,000 times at this point, but they are just factually the lowest price place you can get this deck online right now. So if you're interested in playing the thing, go ahead and order it. You can click the first link in the description to either view the deck list or just buy it outright, whatever you want to do. And I hope I talked you into it because I really think this deck has a chance of being serious in Standard right now. So give the thing a try if you can and let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments section. But I'm pretty sure I'm tapped out for now. Just do the YouTube stuff as usual. Like the video. It helps out a ton. And subscribe if you haven't done that yet. It's about time you subscribed. If it's the first time you've ever seen me, subscribe too, because there's a bunch of other content for Core Set, Standard, and beyond coming up here. I got a lot of decks I want to cover. So we'll get to all those really, really soon. And you can do other stuff if you want to. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev for funny stuff occasionally, serious stuff other times, and to be caught up on when we release videos. Or if you really want to support the channel, you can throw $1 on the Patreon pot. That'll help you out too, though, because that'll let you vote on what decks are coming up next, and I'll let you know what decks we're doing 24 hours before I upload them. So in exchange for information, all I ask is $1 a month. It's not really a bad deal. But I'm pretty sure that is it for now. But if you wanted some more content, pre-releases in just a couple of days, and just about a week ago, I made a super sweet pre-release guide. So that's like over 30 minutes of content talking about that sealed environment. You might want to check that out if you want to do good at pre-release. I want you to, so check that video out. I'll leave a link in the description for you on that one, but I'm pretty sure I'm actually done. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.